אשת חיים ימצא ורחוק מפנים בכלל. ותחבא לבעלה ושאלה לו יחסר גמרתהו טוב ולא רע כל ימי חייה. דרשה צמר ופשתים ותעש בחפץ כפיה. הייתה קוניות סוחר אם ירחק תביא לחמה ותקום בעוד לילה ותיתן טרף לביתה בחוק נערותיה. זממה שדה ותיקחהו מפרי כפיה נטע כרם. חגה בעוז בוטניה ותאמל זרועותיה. טעמה כי טוב שכרה לא יכבה בלילה נראה. ידיה שילחה בקישו וכפיה תמחופה לך. כפה פרסה לעני וידיה שילחה לאביון לא תירה לביתה משלג. כי כל ביתה לבושנים מרבדים עשתה לה 6 וארגמה לבושה. נודע בשענים בעלה בשבטו עם זקנה ארץ. סדין עשתה ותמכור חגול נתנה לכנעני. עוז ועדה לבושה ותצחק ליום האחרון. פיה פתחה בחוכמה ותורת חסד הראשונה. זופייה לכל ביתה. ולחם עצלות לא תאכל. קמו בניה וישורה בעלה ויהללה רבות בנות עצו חיל והתעלית על כולנה שקר החן ואבל היופי. אישה יראת אדוני תתהלל תנונה מפרי ידיה ויעלוה בשערים מעשיה. To my dear wife Linda, Rena, Mark, David, we are here to mourn the passing of our mother, Toiba Bashlomo David Alevi Alea Shalom. She was also known as Yunina. The accomplishments of my mother-in-law are too many to enumerate. We all know that she was an Eshet Chayil. She was a popular person. She was a person whom people looked up to. Besides being a master teacher, besides teaching in many different schools, including Bet Sefer Fuchs Mizrahi, I remember very clearly when she gave a class to the Yabi High School students, and a whole group of girls from the Hebrew Academy after school hours came to take that course. And they wrote a book. And that was my mother-in-law. Extremely organized in her teachings, in her thoughts. Even though she taught perhaps the same course year after year, but to her it was always a new class, a new preparation, because there were new students. She influenced literally thousands of people. She was famous for that trip to Europe, to the concentration camps. And there was a purpose and a meaning for that. To teach the students not only the history in the books and the videos and in speeches, but how true it was to be standing in a concentration camp and to see reality, where it happened and how it happened. The greatest accomplishment, those trips, was the trip to Israel. And again, she wanted to show how wonderful Eretz Israel was. First there was death, in the camps. And Hitler and Machshemo thought he eliminated the Jewish people. Then she stood there to go through another guide in Israel to teach her students that here it is. We did not die. No, we were not eliminated. And to show how vibrant the country was. And to show them the many attractions that Israel had to offer. She did just the opposite of what the Meraglim did, as we read in this week's Parsha. The Meraglim, the scouts, the spies, who came back to Moshe Rabbeinu after their sojourn there in Eretz Canaan, they came back and they said to the Jewish people, it is a horrible place. We cannot compete with that army. They will destroy us. And only Kalev ben Yefune and Yehoshua ben Nun and Leatrice Rabinsky got up and fought. And they said, it is not true. No divas ra'ah, no lashon hara, no evil tongue on that country. My experience with my mother-in-law was mostly educational. I know from the first time, years and years ago, when I met her, she was beside herself. She was jumping up and down. It was the greatest Shalom Aleichem I ever had in my life. And she meant it. There's one wonderful attribute that we must recognize. I never heard her speak Lashon Hara. And every time she had the opportunity, her mannerism showed that I'm not interested. I don't want to talk about it. And she had a smile on her face because there's no purpose, there's no reason to do that. When she spoke to the children she taught, she spoke words out of her heart. Divrei Chachamim benachas nishmayin. If you want to influence, if you want to convince someone to do something, speak to them softly so they would listen. And those words have to come out of your heart. Dvarim hayotzim min halev. And she was that example. That's what she used to do. Her home was always open to orchim. My father-in-law was the greatest machnis orchim. She didn't make any difference between who the person was, whether rich or poor, whether he was frum or not frum, Reform, Orthodox, didn't make any difference to her. He was a Yid who needed a place. And when he came to her table, it was a banquet. There's no such thing as paper plates. Everything was the best china, the best silver, the best of everything, and the best food. Because that is Eshes Chaya. That is royalty, which an Eshes Chaya brings about. And she conveyed that message to her children. Decency, understanding, because once you have that decency and understanding of the other person, you can teach the other person. Her goal in life was to bring about the history of the Holocaust, to teach people, look what happened to our brothers and sisters. She was a person who was extremely appreciated by Kol Israel. As a matter of fact, just about 5 minutes ago, as people came to see the family, they stopped in that small office to tell me a little story here and there. about my mother-in-law. The popularity that she earned, she didn't look for. What she looked for was someone to share, someone to teach, someone to show what happened to the Jewish people in Europe. And of course, the highlight of all that sadness when you went to a concentration camp to visit, and the crying and the Kaddish and the histories, the highlight was Israel. The highlight was, let's go to Eretz Israel, that Yehoshua ben Nun and Kaleb ben Yefune brought us to. This is the beauty, and she was so popular there. She was known in the school system. She was known by the Prime Minister, Menachem Begin. And she never sat back for a minute. And when she was there, again, she invited people to her house, to her apartment in Tel Aviv. And again, with the best of everything. That is what an Eshes Chayil, that's one of the attributes of an Eshes Chayil. The characteristic traits of an Eshes Chayil actually are many. But there's one very important point that I personally think we should dwell on, is V'lechem atzlus lo sochal. She never ate nor fed her guests or her children, her family, spoiled bread. What's the meaning of it? Spoiled bread, what's wrong with that? A day old? The answer is only the best that should come and sit at a table, because the shulchan domeh lamizbeach. The table is equivalent to the altar in the holy temple. And therefore you only bring the best as a sacrifice to Hashem. Not long ago, I lost my mother, Aleh Shalom. And now again. But we have a nechama, my wife and I, that we thank Hashem for giving us our mother for so many years, for keeping the family together for so many years, for teaching us, the children, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren. She is going to be missed. By her children, of course. By her family, of course. By all of us, the entire Jewish community. Who didn't know Leatrice Rabinsky? Who didn't hear Leatrice Rabinsky? She was famous in Washington. Wherever you went, Leatrice Rabinsky, of course. I never forget, it is perhaps a funny story. On this street where they lived, on Andrews and Shannon, there was a street worker who was paving the street. And he heard my mother-in-law's voice. He got up from the ditch he was in, and he turns around and he says, "Dr. Rubinski." Who didn't hear of Dr. Rubinski? Who didn't know? He was one of her students. Do you know how many people actually became Shomer Shabbos because of her? Because of those trips she took. And she brought all those students to see the horrors of the Nazi concentration camps. but she was quiet. She had a measure of modesty. She didn't go around telling, I did this and I did that. Very quietly, and always with a sense of an intellectual guiding, and very proper and to the point. She walked like that, she dressed like that, she thought like that. At this point, I would like to daven to Hashem to receive her neshama and keep it with nishmos tzadkanios, with the righteous women in Gan Eden. And I would ask her to stand up for us, as she always did, and daven to Hashem. Tiye nafsha tzrura v'tzor chaim. Amen.
Very hard to add to the very beautiful world that Rabbi Ben Susan shared about Leatrice. Really encapsulated her life and her accomplishments. I think about the fact that in Leatrice's passing, it's really the end of an era for the family, an era for our community. Leatrice and Usher were so involved in the community, did so much for our community, building the Young Israel, the schools, Menorah Park, Federation, Bureau. There were so many things that they did in their own quiet, unassuming way. As Machnise Orech, people always had guests in their home, people who cared, people who were involved. I've often shared that we look at our community today in the year 2018, and we live in a community that has become so strong and growing, but we don't realize it was these kinds of individuals who really put the foundations in to give us this wonderful, beautiful community. But Leatrice did it in so many ways, with her charm, with her warmth, with her love, with her dedication. She was a pleasure to be with. Whenever you were in the room with her, somehow she lit up the room. There were times, even recently, that I would meet her walking into a pizza shop or a restaurant. She was eating with maybe one of her helpers or maybe with a friend. And as soon as she saw that I was there, the warm greeting that I got made me really feel like $1 million. But I think that was her nature. She made everyone feel like $1 million. That's why she was so successful as a teacher, as a Mora. It wasn't just that she had the information, but how she gave it over and how she made you feel so good and so wonderful and so important. She was a powerhouse. And it's no coincidence, as Rabbi Ben Susan mentioned, that her patir that she passed this week in Parshas Shlach, which of course is the story in the Torah of how the Jews rebelled about getting the gift of the land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael. Leatrice was a true religious Zionist. She and Usher both loved Eretz Yisrael so much, although she would have loved to have made Aliyah, then never quite happened. But she wanted to be buried in Eretz Yisrael, to at least have the opportunity to be connected, if not during her life, but for eternity. But again, one of her most important accomplishments, as was mentioned, was her teaching about the Holocaust, how powerful, what Yom HaShoah meant to her, how she would call me before Yom HaShoah to remind me, to make sure I attend, to come, to be there, and how important it was that we need to continue to educate, as she did, so many thousands of students, of what that meant, and how we can continue, and again, as was mentioned, going to Eretz Yisrael, going from death to life, and how important that was. She was full of life. Her simchas hachayim, her love of life, was so real. You could feel it. It was palpable. You go to visit her sometimes at home, at her house, even if there were a million things going on, but she always found the time to talk, make me feel at home. I actually tried to visit her just this past Erev Shavuos. Knocked on the door, there was no answer, only to find out after Shavuos that she had taken ill. And I went to see her in the hospital, and unfortunately she was sleeping, so we didn't have a chance to connect. but I know that I felt a very strong connection to her. Maybe she felt a little bit like I was one of her children. Definitely of that age bracket to feel that way. But she made me feel so much at home and so much part of her life. They did so much for our community. They did so much for their beautiful family. There was nothing more important than her family. As was mentioned, the idea of putting out the best of dishes, that wasn't just for guests. How many of us, if our children, or better yet, our grandchildren were visiting our home, would have had our china? Most of us be looking for the cheapest paper plates, spoons, and forks, but not when her grandchildren or great-grandchildren came. That's my nachas. That's my future. That's my eternity. That's my nitzchias. And therefore she did it with such love and commitment and dedication. So Toiva, Yonina, Bas Shlomo David Halevi, we will miss you dearly. You were a tremendous gift to your family, to your husband, to your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, but a gift to our community, a gift to the Jewish people. You taught so much through your example, through your love, through your simchas achayim, your happiness, through your unbelievable skill as a teacher to give over the information, but not only to give over the information, but give it over with a sense of love, with a sense of pride, and a sense of dignity. Yeh zichra baruch, may her memory be a source of strength and blessing. May she be a complete melitza yosher. She can literally go up and stand in front of the heavenly court and say, God, Eretz Yisrael, it's on my list. Please bring peace in Eretz Yisrael, bring safety to everyone living in Eretz Yisrael, bring safety to the Jews around the world. Look at all the chesed she did. Look at all the chesed she and Usher did. Look at all the building blocks they did to build this beautiful community that we have today. She has a right to be a true Melitza Yosher that we can learn from her life, the life of her family, and may we only learn and come out with simchas and going towards our future. I'd like to ask Rabbi Dessler if he'll share a few words.
Rabbi Ben Susan, Rabbi Bernstein, family and friends. Parsha Shlach begins with the spies who painted the bleak picture and the negative perspective of Eretz Yisrael, the promised land. They perceived negativity because their attitudes represented negativity. Yet the Parsha concludes with the mitzvah of tzitzis, for just as the spies were instructed, liros es haaretz, to see the land, so too the Torah mandates, uri'isem oso, to see the tzitzis, to be inspired by mitzvahs, and to be inspired by the Almighty. Two individuals observe the same scene. One sees sunshine, and one sees clouds. Dr. Leatrice Rabinsky was an individual who saw sunshine, who created sunshine, and who engendered sunshine. The granddaughter of Rabbi Dr. Shraga HaKohen Rosenberg, a prominent rabbi here in Cleveland. She spoke highly of him and spoke of him as her mentor. When she was in high school, she hesitated to dissect a cat, and he encouraged her and taught her a lesson that would remain with her for the rest of her life, that all knowledge comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Almighty. As a youngster, she established a lifelong relationship with my mother, who was her youth group leader, and with Rebbetzin Rachel Sorotskin, who was her teacher after public school. Her marriage to Usher Rubinski began a beautiful chapter in their lives, one of mutual respect, one of community involvement, one of dignity, and one of royalty. An extraordinary individual and a remarkable educator, Dr. Rubinski was a pioneer who brought Holocaust education to scores of American students. And with it came those incredible lessons of tolerance. As was mentioned, she led the Journey of Conscience tours to the concentration camps and ultimately to powerful Israel. And in this way, she helped change the face of this world and she helped make this world a better place to live. She was an ambassador of our faith and a guardian of our Masorah. Her dignified character, remarkable class, and impeccable moral compass placed her really in a league of her own. Reb Usher and Leatrice Rabinsky were cherished friends and supporters of the Hebrew Academy of Cleveland. They were guests of honor at the Academy's annual dinner. Their children and grandchildren received their education at the Academy, and now their great-grandchildren are current students. And I know that they couldn't have been more proud of the beautiful life that they built and the beautiful family that they raised. Proud of their children, Rebitz and Linda, Rena, Mark and David. Proud of their grandchildren, proud of their great-grandchildren. Those of us in Cleveland Heights were privy to the exceptional Kibbut Av V'Aim of Mrs. Linda Ben Susan, who taught our community a lesson in how to honor parents. Toiva Bas Shlomo David Halevi, you once said, and I quote, "My goal is to lay the foundation, lay the groundwork so that Holocaust education will continue for future generations." You succeeded beyond that. You did that and so much more. For your legacy will continue for future generations as well. May you be a Melitz Yosher for your wonderful family, for our community, and for Klal Yisrael.
In Leatrice's many years of being involved in Holocaust education, she developed a very special relationship with one of our members, Mrs. Bertha Lautman, Aleha Shalom. Bertha became a tremendous foundation for education and for teaching so much as someone who survived the Holocaust, and we all learned a lot from her. I'd like to ask Dr. Lautman, her son, to share some thoughts with you.
With the permission of the rabbis and with the permission of the Rubinski family, I stand here as an emissary of literally thousands of students across the country, students of Leatrice. You should forgive me, but ever since I met her at age 17, she insisted I call her Leatrice. Not only students am I an emissary of, there are thousands upon thousands of souls who asked to be here. And most importantly, for me personally, is of course my mother. If she were able to, she would be here speaking. If not, she would send a letter. Here is the letter. Dear Leatrice, dear friend, many years ago, we became partners in crime. Many years ago, you started a revolution. The concept of teaching the Holocaust had been talked about, but you brought it to reality. But you did so much more than that. Not only myself, but you brought Holocaust survivors out of the woodwork. You got us to tell our story. So many of us had been silenced by what we had seen, and so many of us did not know how to talk. and you opened that door, not just for me, but for many survivors. And then you came up with a ridiculous idea. Let's go to Eastern Europe. Let's take students back. Do you remember our first trip? We weren't the greatest planners because we went in the middle of winter. Do you remember the looks of the Polish workers looking at a strange group of Americans and teenagers walking through the camps? Do you remember when we were in Israel and we rode camels and we were both shrieking like little girls? Do you remember when we were in Amsterdam and we got dressed up for dinner like two little Dutch girls and we couldn't stop giggling together? Do you remember the eyes of Rosa Ruiz, a Mexican girl who accompanied us on one of our trips? As I told my story, her eyes opened up into her soul. And this little girl who knew nothing about World War II and what happened, it penetrated her heart. She wasn't Jewish, and that wasn't important. You touched the soul. Do you remember walking into my bunk, Block 27? You took me there the first time. I got to thank the people that helped me survive. When we walked in, we were there with a group of students. But I felt the footsteps and the souls of every girl who was with me in Block 27. When they opened that door for us, they all walked in together. So often in the camps we had talked about who will remember us. And you enabled that to happen. You took us to meet Simon Wiesenthal. And this is what he said. After the war, he met up with another survivor or two, and they talked about his work. And he said, "You're a righteous man. You believe in God and life after death. I also believe. When we come to the other world and meet the millions of Jews who died in the camps, and they ask us, 'What have you done?' there will be many answers. You will say, 'I became a jeweler.' Another will say, 'I smuggled coffee and American cigarettes.' Another will say, 'I built houses.' But I will say, 'I didn't forget you.' And you didn't forget us. You know that when the war was over, the survivors would do something called organisieren, which was to just go back and walk into people's houses and show them the number on their arm and then just take stuff. That number in the arm opened doors then. Mine was 1048. I can tell you that when I came up here into this world, that same number on my arm parted the ways of the souls as here came a survivor from Auschwitz. There are not many in Jewish history that can stand in our footsteps. Leatrice, today is your Levaya here, and then you will be going to Israel for another one. I can promise you that there will be a third Levaya. we come out for very few. But for you, we are coming out. Dignitaries like Elie Wiesel and Simon Wiesenthal will be waiting for you. There will be little children who never reached the age of a bar mitzvah or a chasana. There will be trainloads of Hungarian Jews. And I will be there to escort you. I will be there, and the girls of Block 27 will be there. And we will take you forward. We will bring you to God, and we will say, here is someone who did not forget us. Here is a farmer. What she started in the 1970s with a trip back to Eastern Europe is now a commonplace occurrence for thousands upon thousands. Here, you will get to watch and see what you planted. I will be waiting for you. Love, Bertha. Thank you.
I apologize in advance that my thoughts are very scattered. My grandmother would probably tell me to pull myself together and to deliver something proper, not because it's about her, but because I'm in front of a room full of people. But it really is hard to even think about how to properly honor and recognize a person that everybody here knows was and is as great and as accomplished and most of all as impactful as Grandma was. She was really principled, and I believe she was driven by most by the idea that everyone should be the change that they want to see. She was a force. She was active literally until the day she died. She had so much to do and so much to accomplish in her life that she was even reading and teaching until a couple of weeks, until right before she went into the hospital. She was so driven that we found out afterwards that she had actually been very, very ill for as long as a week before she was finally had her heart attack, that she had to go into the hospital. Nothing could stop her. Grandma's most known for her impact as a teacher. But even more than that, she really was an activist. My Uncle Avram talked about how she led by example and oftentimes had the wisdom to be quiet or softer spoken so as to make sure that her message was not only received, but actually people would internalize it and then feel driven by it. Many of the principles that drove her, some of the principles that drove her, were the ideas of equality, the importance of education, the beauty of her Judaism, and the importance of integrity. In terms of equality, it was said already today by a number of people that everybody, quite literally everybody, who came into her house was greeted with the utmost respect. There was no gradation of respect that was afforded to anybody, in terms of quite literally from sitting in the front room and having a proper conversation to being greeted in the dining room and eating on the finest of china. Grandma spent time and greeted everybody who came into her house and invited people to come into her house, no matter who they were. In terms of education, I think that's pretty obvious. The question that we're wondering, that my brothers and I were talking about earlier today, was how many people do we think she actually influenced? I mean, it's remarkable to sit there and argue, was it tens of thousands or was it hundreds of thousands? When you think through all the people that were directly touched by Grandma, or by the programming that was inspired by the programming that she pioneered. Her religion was definitely the guiding principle in her life. Grandma found beauty in Judaism, in everything that, and saw it manifest. Her religion was manifested in everything that she did. Many people in this room knew my grandmother as Dr. Rubinski. There was a period of time where I was also instructed to call Grandma Dr. Rubinski. And that's who she was. She was stern, and she was tough, and she was disciplined. But that was all driven by her honesty, her absolute integrity, and her fairness. One of the most inspiring stories that I unfortunately have not had much time to recall others, but one of the early ones that comes to mind that I will forever remember and be inspired by is the story of one of Grandma's early trips to the concentration camps. And she was walking and found a pair of tefillin, or somebody gave her a pair of tefillin, I think, that were found. I don't remember the specifics of it. But she took them home and had a sofer look them over and actually turned them into a pair of kosher tefillin that my grandfather wore every day for the rest of his life. And that was, again, who they were. Not everybody had to know the actions that they were taking, but notwithstanding what was known, they were both driven by taking action. Grandma was truly a role model, and she led by example, again, big and small, but always stepped up. She would teach and dedicated her life, or part of her life, to teaching, because the idea of ignorance is just unacceptable. And so she did her part, and I would argue a lot more than just her part. She made it comfortable to help others tell their stories. And recognizing, as it relates to Holocaust survivors, she was wise in the fact that not only would survivors help educate others by telling their firsthand accounts of the atrocities that happened, but Grandma was also very, very empathetic and recognized that helping survivors tell their stories would actually be cathartic for them as well. She and my grandfather, Grandma and Grandpa, were very influential in bringing over survivors after the war. Not only helping them find a safe place to live, but also helping them matriculate into the community, earn livelihoods, and live lives of dignity and purpose. Israel was so, the identity of my grandma's Zionism was such a prominent part of who she was. And Grandma and Grandpa used to pride themselves on the fact that they'd been to Israel over 50 times, and they had a home there, that they would and see their family there very, very frequently as they could travel. And at the other characteristic that comes to mind, and it's ironic because so many of us, so many people, again, tens of thousands or more, were influenced by Grandma, and she was so driven to make an impact for the right reasons. But Grandma really lived a life, believe it or not, where she valued family above all else. And she was always there. The hard part was when you have over 20 grandchildren and over 50 great-grandchildren, and people would try to call. I'd try to call and wish her a happy birthday. You'd have to go through 10 different busy signals in order to get through. But it was because everybody loved her and wanted to express their love to her, because she did that for all of us. Grandma will very much be missed. But I am sure, and I know that her legacy will live on. Lastly, what I would ask, and what I pray, is that all of us in this room today leave this room today as better people because of the interactions that we've had with Grandma, with Dr. Rubinski. And that the teachings and the direction that she dedicated her life to impart upon us manifest themselves somehow in some actions that we take, in some principles that we take on to guide our lives and to make an impact.
Please rise for the Kelmalei Rachamim. Kelmalei Rachamim shochein b'meromim hametzei menucha nechona al kanfei hashechina b'ma'alos kedoshim utarim kizor rakia mazirim es nishmas Toiba Bashlam David Halevi Shochal Yom Lama Babur Shana Mispalim Badas Karas Nishmasa Bigan Eden Tehemenu Chasa Lochem Alarachamim Yasira Beseser Kinapav Liolamim Bitzror Chaim Es Nishmasa Adonai Unachalasa Nuach V'Shalom Al Mishkava V'Noimar Amen. Seated. The schedule is as follows. The Kfura, the burial, will be in Eretz Yisrael tomorrow evening at 8:30 p.m. actually scheduled in the cemetery in Chadera in Eretz Yisrael. Linda and David will be returning back to sit Shiva after Shabbos here in Cleveland. Mark Amin will be sitting Shiva in Eretz Yisrael. As far as the schedule here in Cleveland, they'll be sitting Shiva at Leatrice's home, 3848 Shannon Road, which is the last home on Shannon Road, the corner of Shannon and Andrews. Starting with Sunday evening, it'll be going through Thursday morning. Sunday evening, the rest of the week, Mincha Marav will be at 8:40 p.m. and Shachris will be Monday through Thursday morning at 7:15 a.m. So again, throughout the week till Thursday morning. 3848 Shannon Road, Mincha Marav, starting Sunday night through Wednesday night, 8:40 p.m. Chakras Monday through Thursday morning at 7:15 a.m.